Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 board school board meeting for Wednesday, November 28th, 2018. We are here in the Durham Community School cafeteria. And I hope Lindsay will be joining us, but she's walking in right now. On cue, look at that, perfect. So we have a full board here this evening, and Clay Canterbury is our student rep for the evening, and we'll hear from him shortly, but we're gonna start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So I would take a motion for consideration and approval for the minutes for the November 14th, 2008 as presented, barring any errors or omissions. John, second. Jeremy, all those in favor? None opposed, thank you. Adjustments to the agenda, we do have one adjustment, section 14A. We have the hiring for an occupational therapist, so we'll get to that a little bit later in the agenda. But didn't have that when the original came out a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. And we'll start with good news and recognition. We have a full house here this evening, which excites me to no end. And we're going to start with football, the Class E champs. And I think Craig is going to start with a few words for us.
Well, it certainly was a very exciting, emotional year, historic year. We had games played in clear blue, sunny skies, overcast, dreary skies, mist, rain, snow, and snow coming down sideways. And that all happened in just one game. And that actually was the Class E championship game, and that weather will only add to the memories of that victory. Congratulations to the team members, the boosters, assistant coaches Benedict, McClendon, Dowdy, St. Pierre, and head coach Paul St. Pierre, who was just recently voted the Campbell Conference Class E Coach of the Year. So it's my honor to introduce, and along with you folks, the school board, recognize the Maine Principals Association 2018 Class E champions.
I apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. I'll do my best. Cody Arsenal. Gage Arsenal. Caden Benedict. Danny Casal. And Tony Casal, Jack Coffin, Justin Cogswell, Hunter Demers, Cameron DeRozier, Jonathan Doyle, Christian Emmanuel, Jonathan Emmanuel, all the brothers stayed home, huh? Danny Fox, Connor Fox, Ed Gayton, Alex Hanna, there we go. Matt Hines, Nate Hines, Noah Larrabee, Aiden Mishu, Trey Morris. Trey Moorhammer. Duncan Nam. Anthony Panciocco. Miles Panenka. Colby Petrin. Bailey Slocum. Adam Ulrichsen. Randy Vickerson. And Jacob Weers.
They're actually meeting tonight, so give them a coach.
Congratulations, guys. That's super exciting and very, very proud of you all. So well done. All right. And we wouldn't be insulted if you guys didn't want to stay for our whole meeting.
You want to hold up that award right there?
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. We would never stand in the way of a team party, so.
Can we see your awards?
Well, these kids actually earned this. State championship plaque, and this is the silver cup for being the regular season and the playoff champions for the Campbell.
Wonderful.
Well
So
done.
You should turn around and show that.
Show the camera. And congratulations to the coaches as well. That's a lot of work and a lot of effort, so that's great. Thank you. One thing I realized that we didn't explain why our superintendent wasn't here this evening. So Cynthia Alexander is our assistant superintendent, and she is filling in for Dr. Foley, who had a run-in with some ice this morning and hurt her ankle. So she is doing well, and I spoke with her today, but not with us this evening. Wow, that place cleared out fast. Thanks, guys.
Hi, Dr. Foley.
Yes, Dr. Foley, I imagine, is watching us from home. I'm sure my phone will start dinging now. Okay, so report from board student rep. So Clay.
Hello, everybody. Thank you again for coming out, and another congratulations to our football champions. And so for the athletic news, the winter sports season had started up. Both boys and girls varsity basketball had scrimmages last night. Both boys and girls had won one game, and the boys were just barely outplayed by Cheverus. Other sports such as alpine and Nordic skiing, indoor track, swimming, cheerleading, and ice hockey all started as well. And now for academics. College representatives from all over the East Coast and beyond continue to come to Freeport High School to give students who signed up to meet with them an idea of what the school would be like. And for the arts, there was a Makers Faire that was held in the FPAC during advisory today. Students who were interested in displaying their creations signed up for a table as an opportunity to sell their homemade crafts. Those crafts included stickers, jewelry, and miscellaneous art. So yeah, that's our news from Freeport High School.
Great, thank you. So moving on to good news from Durham Community School. Will Pidden. Sorry, your whole audience left.
Yeah, I have to say, I thought everyone was here for our good news and recognition. We should have gone first, maybe. Actually, no, again, it's exciting. What a great season for all the fall sports. So to start off, I'd like to actually introduce Kelly Rogers, who is our assistant principal, and a number of you have not had a chance to really meet Kelly. Kelly's going to start off sharing a couple of things going on, and I'm just going to add to that. So I'll start off with Kelly. Oh, you're here. Sorry.
So we have a lot of, do I have to move this one? Can you hear me okay? We have a lot of really awesome things going on at Durham Community School right now and for this year. Some of the most recent things that we've had going on, we had a kindness week, which was really great, a nice way for us to really capitalize on our grade level spans. So we did some pairing with our big kids with our little kids, really working to build some community and identify how our school is great, how each other are great, having kids identify why they are great. So there was kind of a theme for each day that week. A Friday turned into a Monday due to our snow day. As part of this week, we had about 400 food item donations from across the school that you can see in one of the pictures there, that goes to LACO, the food pantry in Lisbon. So just to kind of give you a sense of what's going on in these pictures, the one with all of the statements are just an example of one of the things students did to recognize the things they love about Durham Community School. Down in the corner you'll see a big kiddo reading with a little, which was really awesome to be able to walk around the school and just see our older kids really taking on leadership roles for our younger kids. It was really great, and they got to walk the pasta parade throughout the hallways and then out to Mr. Lyon's car for delivery to LACO, and that was really very, very cool. They're very proud to hold their big friend's hand, and it was really great equally to see the mentorship that, seeing our bigger kiddos kind of take the littles under their wings and, kind of guide them through that experience. It was very, very cool. Another thing that's going really well right now in our school is RTIB. I think this is a term that you guys are familiar with. We are working really hard to own this idea that kids do well if they can across all both social emotional realms as well as our academics. The pictures that you see are some examples of some supportive structures in place within what we call it our Bridges program. It's an opportunity for kids to, if they're having a really hard time emotionally, it's kind of a reset space where, they get some coaching from our RTIB EdTech and build a plan so that they can successfully re-enter their setting. Their classroom setting with hopefully some good skills and an opportunity to kind of, do any repair work they might need to do before that goes. It's really provided an opportunity for kids to get some individualized plans and some reinforcement for those plans, as well as teaching into some of those skills that we know that kids need to develop to be more successful. There's a team that meets every week to kind of review how the kids are doing. Do we need to check and adjust any plans? And we've had some great success with some of our kids that are accessing this program. We have a lot of great social emotional learning going on in our building right now as well. We do have a new guidance counselor, Mrs. Trigiani, who she's really working to incorporate mindfulness and yoga into her guidance classes, which is very cool to see, and that's what you see in the pictures. You see some kiddos doing some stretches. She uses a lot of yoga for classrooms material. And, these practices, there's a lot of research that shows that these practices really help kiddos develop the parts of brains that control self-regulation and emotional regulation, and also focus and attention. And what's really cool is we're starting to see kids try to transfer those from those practices into their regular classroom experiences, which is really neat. And right now we have started sort of a focused practice with our 5th grade, where once a week they will get a mindfulness and yoga session with our guidance counselor, which teachers will be part of to then integrate back into their daily routines. So we're kind of working to look to see what the benefits of that end up being, which we anticipate being very positive. So that's another really cool thing.
I'm going to add on to a couple of pieces that Kelly shared. Just a little piece, we also have, along with our new assistant principal and new guidance counselor, our STEM teacher is new to us this year, Ms. Hughes, and they've been doing a lot of things with the STEM classes. I noticed, but in the invitation to come learn about different things at the schools, I'm afraid the date of the visit to Durham wasn't on there. I apologize for that. And I'll make sure that gets shared with you, but it's Tuesday, February 12th, 8:45 to 10:45 for sort of science and STEM. But we'll make sure we get that sent out to you so you can be clear on it. So one of the pieces that Nicole has done, and we're just going to give a quick glance at it, is hope I can link into that. And then make that full page. How do I do that? On the school website, she's created a link to the STEM page, and she has developed across our 10 grade levels. You'll see the progression of skills that the students will work through as their curriculum pieces. And within each area, sorry, that's not quite big enough to see. So design sensitivity and maker empowerment, engineering design standards, and then STEM class principles around imagine possibilities, dig into mistakes, embrace challenges, ask questions, share and show kindness. And that goes across, if we went up to 6th grade, for example, you would see also design sensitivity and maker empowerment and how it progresses up into sophistication. Engineering design standards, again, more sophisticated, but the STEM class principles continue throughout the time. The character that you see there with the question mark, Mr. Q is all about, she really pushes around sort of student curiosity. I wasn't quite familiar with Mr. Q until I was in a 1st grade classroom a couple of weeks into the school year, and a child was asking a question in their writing, and just started saying, so is this a question that you're asking in your writing? Yes. It's like, so how do we end a sentence that where you're asking a question? And like, oh, and they put a period. I'm like, well, that's how we might end a sentence, but a sentence that where we're asking a question, there's another thing that we use for that. And he was sort of struggling with it. And so it's a question mark. So I drew a question mark. I said, oh, you mean Mr. Q? And I'm like, hold on a minute. I'm not sure I know who Mr. Q is. So between us, we're figuring it out. Let me come back to the Technology Club. Ms. Hughes runs after school. This first session was for grades 2 and 3. They were working using Scratch, creating animations, which is a software program. The next session will be for grades 4 through 6. They're going to be working on augmented reality. And she's running different sessions through the year for the different age groups. Next Tuesday, there's a family coding night where families with students in grades 2 through 4 are invited to come in and solve coding puzzles. And some of our older students are going to be coming in as sort of coding experts. And a couple of the other pieces, 7th and 8th graders have been, they were worked with doing rapid prototyping invention project during their risk-taking unit. The 6th graders complete their first 3D design and printing projects, created some props to be incorporated into the stop-motion animations. And kindergartners are getting their first exposure to robotics. They're using our B-bots. 2nd graders will soon be designing and 3D printing as well from their designs. So a number of things going on with STEM. And then our drama club performance, which was terrific. So it was The Wizard of Oz, and we did find the wizard. I know last time I was at the board meeting, I wasn't sure we would, but we did. And it was the first year we've actually not done it in here. The crowds have gotten so large that we did it on the gym side. And so the children did a great job, along with the parents did an amazing job of helping with makeup and costumes and everything else that goes on. So it was a fun 2 nights. And that second night was actually when it had been that snow day, but everything was good to go. So they continued. They followed the white brick road that night. And then lastly, in Kelly's previous role at school she was leading, had found using Instagram or closed sort of Facebook accounts as being another way of communicating with families about upcoming events. It's not something we've done previously, so it's something we're trying right now, and you're going to see how that works for us, especially around pieces like the players on tonight, or there's coding night on Tuesday. It's really that kind of thing. It doesn't replace sort of Tiger Tails or emails at this point, but so we're trying out that aspect of social media also. And that is good news and recognition. Thank you very much.
Yes, Maddie.
I love that you're doing that. And I also love the piece that Kelly was sharing. Forget what you were calling it exactly, but the I'm super because whatever. Those were two pieces that I heard in that MSMA conference that they sound like simple little things, but they're a great way to build connection with the community and build pride in our schools throughout the community as well. So it seems like a little thing, but it has a pretty big ripple effect. So I'm happy to see you guys doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. That was a great presentation. I wanted to ask, how much time do students get for STEM at the different grade levels? Is it on a daily basis or a weekly basis?
The way it works, it's a little bit different across the grade levels. So in the actual STEM class, it's pre-K through 8 program, and it's part of the specials rotation. So in pre-K 4, it's weekly, because it rotates through the other specials. In 5-6, they'll do like a week rotation, and then a week of art, and then a week of music. And so it all works out to be the same amount of time. You either have it in sort of a clustered group, where they get slightly more sophisticated projects, or it's spread out. But in essence, it's the equivalent of once a week, every week. But as I say, sometimes they're for longer periods of time. Like in the upper grades, they do longer periods because they're doing more complex projects. But that's partly why we then have the progression over the 10 years, because once a week isn't a whole lot of time. But accumulated over that time period and building developmentally. So when you heard that kindergartners are using B-bots, that evolves into different coding activities and then the Lego robotics. And so by the time they work through, those become more familiar skills.
And does STEM ever get integrated with some of the other content areas?
So it does more so in the upper grades, but within each grade, our specials teams are very fortunate. They work very well together as a group, and they plan out integrated units at each sort of cluster level. So our specials meet at 2 grade level clusters. So 3rd and 4th grade would have it at the same time, or 5th and 6th grade have it at the same time because of our numbers. And the specials team would then do an integrated unit that would work with all the 3rd and 4th graders, for example, would share in that experience, or all the 5th and 6th graders would, or all the 7th and 8th graders do. And so they integrate more within the specials. So you heard reference to those sort of rapid prototyping. That was part of the risk unit, where there's still some of the bubble wrap bodies around. And within each of those subject areas, there's aspects of risk-taking, and it's into the context of, early adolescence, but sort of positive risk-taking as learners would be the sort of theme there. And they look at that across discipline. The science is often sort of supplementary then. So, for example, some of the STEM pieces we do wouldn't be standalone in terms of not understanding a scientific concept or phenomena. So there will be times where with STEM, there may have been something going on with science that then is applied perhaps to a STEM context.
Sure.
One more, last one, I promise.
Sure.
So I'm really interested and supportive of all the work that you're doing with yoga and meditation, and obviously there are a lot of studies that show that the benefits are incredible for students and for learning. How early do you start the students, and do you notice that if you start them, say, at the middle school level, they're not as open to the idea?
Well, your question is a great question, but it's quite new to us. So we don't quite have that longitudinal perspective on it yet. I don't know if there's something you want to add to that, but Mrs. Trigiani had done this sort of work at her previous school. She was working at as a guidance counselor, which was a K-6 school, and had seen it being very beneficial across the grade levels. I would anticipate, as I think your question infers, that starting it with older children, we may bump into some self-consciousness that is less evident in younger children. But which is why we're very intrigued and excited about this work with 5th grade, because that's a group that are right there with starting to feel self-conscious. But Mrs. Trigiani has scheduled this out. This is an 11-week program that she's going to be doing. So I don't doubt that the first few sessions there'll be some self-conscious responses. But I think when the children recognize that this is a part of the school culture and it's something that's valued, that their teachers are participating also, that we're referring to it also, that it will be interesting to see what does that look like 11 weeks later. So in a few months, we'll be able to give you a better sense of that.
Thank you. Give us a report. I'm curious to know.
Yes, we're excited to get it going. And I should say that it's not just that. Mrs. Trigiani does it. And Mrs. Lazar also, less on the yoga part, certainly very much on the mindfulness component. Mm-hmm. And so to be able to now sort of supplement that, or in essence, a complementary, we'll be interested to see how it goes.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Public comment? Yay! So just ask that you step up, tell us your name, where you're from, and...
Yeah. Hi. I sent you guys an email. I don't know if you received it, but it's basically the script, a little letter that I wrote to you. So I am Josh Olens. I'm a Freeport parent, 2 kids, both graduated. I'm also the chair of the Town of Freeport Sustainability Committee. And in addition, I'm a 1st grade teacher in Falmouth. So, and in that role, I was a primary driver in changing the waste disposal and waste hauling programs in the Falmouth school districts. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit today, because I know as the budget time is approaching, we'd like to just make sure that this is on your radar. I wanted to say that the RSU 5 is uniquely poised right now to make some really important changes to our waste hauling practices. It's one more way that Freeport and Pownell and Durham can lead the way in our clean living and sustainable brand that we have here in Freeport. If you think about the bag ban and the styrofoam ban and EV car charging stations and all the outdoor adventures we have here. You probably know that most of our waste in southern Maine is incinerated, and the cost to us and the environment is much greater when when wet organic waste has to be burned. Even if it is for energy, it's a higher cost. And it's, of course, more costly to the environment, too. Composting food scraps and other organic waste reduces the incineration stream, and it would create a useful product as well. So my argument is to remove as much as we can. Though most of the work that my committee does is in the town of Freeport, we're really anxious to ensure that all the schools and students in RSU 5 have equal access and opportunities to both save money on waste hauling and to help create a useful product of composted soil. And as a teacher, a 1st grade teacher and elementary teacher, I can add that composting is most certainly a powerful teaching tool in science and environmental studies, as well as responsible citizenship. I'm coming to you today because our towns are very lucky at this moment because we have access to a really perfect combination of single stream recycling through EcoMaine and other facilities, as well as low cost composting through We Composted and Garbage to Garden. It has the potential to greatly reduce the cost and the footprint of the waste that we produce in the schools. This year, the Freeport Sustainability Advisory Board, which is my committee, the Freeport Town, has provided financing in the form of a grant for most schools in Freeport to pilot composting programs. Both FHS and Mass Landing schools took advantage of our grant offer to the tune of $1,800 at FHS and $800 at Mass Landing. Both schools have diverted many tons of waste between the single stream recycling and composting. I bring up the Freeport schools as more of to share the results that we've enjoyed by getting some of these projects going there, and I want to make them available here in Durham and Pownell too. Both schools have diverted many tons of waste between the single stream recycling and composting programs. For data collection purposes, last school year, 2017-18, Mass Landing School alone diverted 25,000 plus pounds or 12 plus tons of food scraps via the We Composted program. And this year, they've already diverted nearly 4 more tons of food scraps. Garbage to Garden reports the high school has diverted nearly 2 tons of food scraps in the first month alone in their new program. So it's a very successful program. A little science here. For every 2 tons of compost removed from incineration, 1 ton of atmospheric CO2 is reduced. And when a car burns 100 gallons of gas, it produces a ton of CO2. So essentially, just by that calculation alone, we are reducing 1,200 gallons of gas a year being burned through cars. And a back-of-the-envelope calculation shows that between the 6 schools in the RSU5, we might be able to reduce the equivalent of cars burning 6,000 to 7,000 gallons of fuel per year. We're reducing the amount of air pollution and CO2 in the atmosphere and saving money by reducing trash hauling fees. So it would be a win-win for money and the environment. As an aside, I don't have numbers for the on-site composting in Pownell, but I understand that there is an on-site composting program here, and I'd love to hear more about that. I'm not sure if there's composting going on in Durham. Recycling in the district is alive, and in some schools doing better than others. EcoMain is available to be used in all Freeport and Pownell schools, but I believe that Durham uses a different recycling hauler. Obviously, the better we get at recycling and composting, the more we stand to save in trash hauling. We really need to become better recyclers in the school, and EcoMain and others are happy to help us do this in any of the schools. In any event, the opportunities here right now to divert all compost and recyclables out of the RSU5 schools at a great savings to our contracted trash hauling fees. The savings can go directly into paying one or both of the local composting companies to upcycle our trash to its highest use of dirt. So, to reiterate, the composted waste that is very heavy and the recyclables can all be removed from our trash dumpsters. That should mean that we can cut our costs and payments to the trash haulers, and most importantly, go toward paying for the composting contract, basically a net zero change. I know this works because it's precisely the same process that we did in Falmouth schools where I teach, and we've implemented a basically identical program. In Falmouth, we saved enough and here's the key, in renegotiating the contract with our trash hauler, that we were able to cover the added cost for composting. So Falmouth School District was able to reduce their trash hauling contract by 1/3. So for every 3 dumpsters that we had at the schools, we were able to remove 1, and that amount of waste was going directly into the composting Garbage to Garden, or we did Garbage to Garden there, and into the EcoMain single stream recycling. That savings of roughly $550 per month covered easily the contract for the compost hauler and left a little bit to spare too. So I implore you all to take advantage of what we have learned from this year's grant to the Freeport schools and the data that I've collected for you, and take a moment to examine our current practices and renegotiate the trash hauling costs. And most importantly, put the cost for the composting program into the school budget for the entire RSU. And at this point, we have offers from composting companies to contract with the entire RSU5 in the range of about $5,000 a year. That would be a little bit less if Pownell continues to do its own private on-site composting. So we believe that figure is a good amount to reserve for this budget line, and more importantly, can be made up in other savings in the general waste hauling lines. Finally, I do want to make an offer to the schools in Pownell and Durham. My committee cannot give you a direct grant because we're strictly a Freeport Town committee, but I can put you in contact with local and federal organizations that are ready to offer grants for all of our schools to help pay for and ease the transition into composting. Obviously, the better we as a district get at recycling and composting, the more we stand to save. And to that end, there are numerous people waiting in the wings, myself included, who are ready to offer support and training and education to help us during this transition for free. So my case is it's a crucial time as you're examining the budget to focus on how much we can save by removing compostables and recyclables out of our trash hauling and renegotiate any trash hauling contracts that we have.
Great.
So happy to answer any questions. A little longer, yes? Hi.
Sorry about that. If I use yours. So there's a giant compost pile at the Freeport transfer station. Why do we not use that? Well, why is the volume so great that we wouldn't compost it locally as opposed to driving trucks to wherever
Sure.
the companies do it?
Great question. Most of what you see at Freeport and other transfer stations would be yard waste, which the content is a little bit different there. You know, it's more grass clippings and leaves and things like that. The biggest advantage to composting with a company like Garbage to Garden or We Compost It is that everything can go in. You know, when we have a backyard composter, we can't really put in meat and dairy and cheese and bones and fish and things like that. But these larger companies have the advantage of volume, and that heats up to a much higher temperature, and so you can put anything in. And when it comes to teaching and doing these kinds of things in a school or any institution, keeping it simple is the best. So if you can just say to the kids, you know, if it was ever alive, if it grew, in it goes, and keeping it simple like that, you can really do well. These companies are amazing. I have to say, both Garbage to Garden and We Compost It come with a lot of history and a lot of really great support staff, and they will come to any school and do you know, games and events and role playing and rollouts of the programs and help with setting up, and it's really there is a cost involved, and I could see that there might be savings in trying to do it locally, but it can get complicated to do it on a small scale.
Thank you.
Valerie, did you want to ask something?
I do, but I'll ask you later because this is not the time when we can ask questions.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to stick around. I need to run if that's all right.
That's okay.
Okay.
It's the protocol.
You can ask a
Great.
clarifying question if it was quick, but if it's a detailed question, yeah, we probably want to.
I'll ask the question. If you can give a 2-sentence response, then great. If you think it's more than that, then just say, I'll answer that question later.
Okay.
So my question was, can you describe the benefits to the environment of composting versus burning the trash? Meaning not the trash, burning the organic waste.
Burning organic waste. Well, if you see the organic waste as the wet, very heavy and wet product that it is, see, these incinerators rely on a fuel, on gas or oil to ignite and burn the trash. So if you're boiling off all steam in heads of lettuce and compost, you're spending a lot of money on getting it close to burnable. So it's not really worth it. Yeah.
That's a good point.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Feel free to consult with me.
Okay. Reports from the Assistant Superintendent.
Good evening. I'm happy to share Dr. Foley's superintendent's report this evening. And hello, Dr. Foley, I know you're watching. So I'd like to start off with the reminder that the board's next opportunity to do a learning walk is going to be at Moore Street School on January 10th. You will observe how the youngest readers progress in their skills while also being able to observe one of our literacy coaches in action. So if you're interested in going, please contact Principal Julie Nickerson at Moore Street School. I think that I'm not sure of the time, but I think it's in Becky's update. Okay, check Becky's update. Next, Pownell Elementary School just celebrated or turned 50 this week, so they just celebrated their birthday. Robin from Pownell Historical Society made a presentation last night to many of the community members talking about how education has evolved in Pownell through the years. Students had written essays that were displayed about the first principle of PES and some of the students and staff that have attended PES throughout the years. Mr. Donahue was mentioned frequently as one of the most memorable and favorite teachers there. The community members were given the opportunity to tour the newly renovated office area, and the evening was a big success. Next, we had our final meeting with RAD last week, and once we receive the final lien waivers, we will release the final payments. We're so excited to have the project finally completed, and the facility has been a source of pride all fall and will continue to be for years to come. Our next upgrade is that we are waiting for the engineer to give us quotes on the PA system. And then we currently have approximately $15,000 left to spend from the fundraising efforts. As far as our strategic plan is going, and it's progressing very well. I happen to sit on that committee. We are now in the drafting phase of the vision, and we'll have a draft to the board in January. And then lastly, Mick Roy, the Executive Director of the Greater Sebago Alliance Board, the Greater Sebago Alliance Regional Service Center, will be joining us at our December meeting on December 12th. And he'll be here to answer questions that you would like him to address before making the decision about whether to join the Regional Service Center next year or not. Based on our last meeting, we know that you're interested in seeing the actual budget, and then Mick will also address how you would go about withdrawing once you are in. And if you have any other questions besides those two items, please email those to Becky. And that concludes the report for tonight.
I'd open it up for questions, but I'm not sure you can answer them, but okay, you could try.
More of a comment. I very much appreciate the administrators inviting us to the schools to spend some time observing how teaching and learning is happening in the schools, and I just want to urge my fellow board members to, whenever, if they possibly can, I know some people work a 9-to-5 job and it's really difficult, but if you possibly can, to do that, especially in this year when we're specifically asking to hear from teachers a lot more. I think we should go the distance to meet them where they work.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments on the superintendent's report? All right, so we will move on to administrative reports. We are going to start with technology first. Director of Technology, Jim Grant. Oh, hold on, before you start talking. Becky says January 10th from 9 to 11 at the Moore Street School.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to address you tonight.
once we can get things moving. I'm used to these displays being behind me, so, pardon me, you won't miss anything. So, we have been evolving as a tech department over the last few months into being more customer service oriented and dealing with all stakeholders. So not just students and staff, but also looking to involve community as well. And we're a new team. I'm in my 3rd month as your tech director. We have brought on a new data specialist project manager in Paula Roberts. Trevor Legassi has been with us for a year and is starting his 2nd year. And then we have 2 new computer technicians joining us as of October. We have a goal completion to report. Starting the first week of school, the Lightspeed audio systems and projectors that were approved last year were installed. It took us a while to get there. We had to go back and wire some of them, but most of the classrooms, I can report now, have the projectors and audio systems installed. So we want to be focused on customer support moving forward. And to do that, we're looking at creation of tech teams in all schools. Some schools already have them, some schools don't. But we want to be an integral part of that and continue to foster that relationship. We want to assist the STEM classrooms wherever necessary and make sure that we're a resource for them. We want to establish student help desk in the MLTI schools, which would be the high school, the middle school, and Durham. We are looking to adjust tech support schedules in the elementary schools to make sure that we're more available at times that teachers need us there instead of being there all day. We want to be there at peak times. We're looking to establish game creation and programming clubs in a number of the schools. And we're partnering with Community Ed to offer tech support times to community members as well. We're working on professional development training and working with our organizations. We attended the ACTEM conference, which is the Association of Computer Technology Educators of Maine. A fairly new group is the Maine Technology Directors Association, of which I joined this year and am actively working with them on legislation and policy to make sure that we are secure. And Paula Roberts, our data person, is a member of the Maine Power School User Group. She also instructs at Power School University. So we're out there representing RSU 5 at all levels that we can find. A goal for this year is School Messenger. We're looking to make sure that our email systems are consistent across all of the schools, and Jenny McManus has taken on the lead to help us in that respect to make sure that all of the communications start to go smoothly. We're working on things. Future needs in network. So in the next few years, MLTI that we are currently in will come to an end, and with that, our network, which is also part of MLTI. So we need to start talking about that. And if we look at the breakdown, the high school, middle school, and half of DCS are under the current MLTI network. The elementary schools are running off the previous buyout of MLTI equipment, so that equipment is starting to become aged. In the next 2 years, we have to look at a budget cycle that will address these issues. The estimated cost to replace the wireless network is approximately $300,000, with some of that cost being recouped through E-rate reimbursement. The rest of it, we're not sure at this time. We don't know if there's going to be another round of MLTI, if there will be funding, if it will be block grants. We're not sure, but I wanted to make sure that it was on your radar as one of the major needs moving forward. So again, thank you for the opportunity to address you. And I know we have a few questions to answer first, and then, if you want me to answer more. So there was a question on screen time and how much students spend on screen time. The answer to that is it varies between classes and students. So the amount of time that a student spends in the elementary school is going to be vastly different than that of a student in the high school. In the high school, it's also going to depend on the class load that they take. Some classes are more dependent on the devices and others aren't. So we do have the ability to monitor that, but we don't currently. We can see how long computers have been on, but that is not an accurate assessment of how much time the student is spending on the device. There are third-party apps which monitor that, but we are not using those currently. We do set time limits to help parents enforce screen time. So at the different schools, between 10 and 11 o'clock, the devices shut down until early in the morning to make sure that students aren't on them overnight. Second part of that question was, do we provide notices of security to the board? I am not aware of a security report to the board. If we have a security incident that happens within our schools, we are currently working on what that looks like for a response. It was recommended at a conference that I attended a couple weeks ago by Drummond Woodsum to have different responses for different types of breaches. I can tell you, however, that I worked last week to remove another one of our local servers to a hosted system. So most of our systems at this point are now hosted, which means student data and employee files are moving to a site that is more secure and has a different level of security than what they would have in-house. And I think, we're moving the final part of that this year and into next year so that that security will be in place. The major thing that can affect us is a denial of service, which we experienced last year. Fortunately, it was not against us, it was against our internet provider. They dealt with that, but I sent out notices to students and staff explaining what we were seeing and why we were seeing it, so that type of notification is happening from our office. We have filters in place that help assist in our security and also in screen time issues. So, we are taking some safeguards, and we can discuss more, but I, am not prepared to stand up here and tell you exactly where we're the weakest. I can tell you where we're the strongest.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was helpful. I appreciate your responses to those questions, and just hearing a little bit about what you're doing in terms of security I found helpful. Of course, we don't want you up there saying all the safeguards that you're putting in place, but so I don't know if the other board members find that periodically helpful to have as well, just kind of like an ad hoc to say if you've dealt with anything recently. So I don't have any other questions. I just wanted to make that comment. And then also just in looking at sort of our, I forget what's called, not security, but technology plan that we have in place for the RSU. I know that we're using Common Sense Media in our schools, and again, I know that's not your department, but the reason I had that question about looking at how long students were spending on screens is because I know one of the components of that program is for parents and students to kind of be aware of what the appropriate amount of time is. Again, like you're saying, that there is no real firm limit for students, but just that we're not taking away from other things such as socialization or other activities that students are engaging in. So I just thought, as a parent personally, I know it's helpful for me to have an idea of how much time my kids are spending on screens. So it's unfortunate that we can't monitor that, but I don't have a question about it. I think it's interesting that there's an app that allows you to do it, but that's all.
So in discussions with the superintendent, our instructors are aware of screen time issues, and it is certainly something that is discussed, how much time is appropriate, just like homework is discussed, how much is appropriate. We try to take more proactive approaches in doing things such as shutting them off at certain times and knowing that there are expectations instead of something reactive like monitoring. And I understand that it would be, beneficial to certain parents, and if parents have a need for that, we can make arrangements for that. But, every parent is different, every student is different, and so at this point, we're taking it on a student-by-student basis.
Sure, thank you.
So Jim, for parents who do request that their screen time for their own kids is monitored a little more closely, what would you offer?
So there are certain, steps that we can take, and each one is different based on what it is that we're looking at. And, we'll work with the parent and the student as much as possible, but, there's also a capacity issue, right? So we're a department of 3 techs spread throughout the district. So we have to keep that in mind as well.
I spoke, I just wanted to add something. I spoke with Ray today, and he had done some work with his parent group around screen time, and there were about 4 people that attended, and he had taken a 2-week period of time, and he used what's called Land School to spot check how often students were on screen time and where they were. And so from the results, and I don't have all of the detail to that here other than the conversation we had today, but he does have a couple of PowerPoints that he's put together. It was an average of 75 minutes per day. And then he did a little research to find out what's recommended. And there's not a lot out there right now with research, but a couple of the organizations that he looked at had 2 to 3 hours as a guide per day. And the other thing I want to mention is there's lots of different reasons that students are on screen time. So we could have students with disabilities that have a higher need of using tablets and other devices. So that would be one reason that theirs would be a higher amount. We also have our Big Ideas Math program where we have online assessments that are given, and there's a huge benefit to using the online system, and also homework assignments. And so I think it's really the teacher's judgment on how they're using it and when they're using it, and so it could vary from week to week. I think the reason Ray used a 2-week window was to see what had already happened last week, and he asked his staff, how much do you anticipate using it next week, because you're usually thinking ahead to what your lessons are going to be. And then he found that, it was about between 75 and 78 minutes. So that's just a little data to give you a little bit more information. I tried to dig into that a little bit, but so.
So thank you, Cynthia, for that report. I think what we were hearing from parents was not that they were concerned necessarily about how much time kids spend on screens during the school day, but how much time they spend on their school device outside of the school. So one of the questions I had is, for example, School LAN or LAN School, I'm not sure which is the correct name, but it's a way that the teachers can monitor if the kids are actually on the site that they ought to be and not watching YouTube videos in class. Is that something that parents can use at home? Because one of the parents were saying, I see my kid on this school device, and I'm not sure if they're doing homework or if they're just playing on it or just watching things that they shouldn't be watching. But I don't know, and I just see the school device and they tell me I'm doing homework, and how do I know? So is there any way that parents like that can monitor what these kids are doing on the screen?
And they're super fast at toggling screen to screen. No,
Right.
there's my big ideas
Before
right
they
there.
can move on to the actual screen where they should be.
I'm going to say I'm in my 3rd month, and I'm going to take a pass on that. I don't know what the copyright or licensing is for land school use outside of an educational environment.
Thank you for doing that, because that could be useful to some parents. I'm not sure how many would use it, but
We could certainly find that out.
I've been using for a year. So with Land School, the way that we have it set up at the middle school, we've been using it for about a year now. When I go in and I install Land School on the teacher's devices, I have to set specific channel IDs to each teacher's device to allow them to look at the computers that are on our network. once the computers are off our network, we can't really see what they can do. So if we were to put land school onto the, from what I assume at least onto, if we wanted to put it to like a home network, that'd be a whole other licensing thing like Jim was saying. So I'm not sure if land school will be possible at the home, but I know that's how it works at the middle school and how we have to set it up through the network.
Thank you. Kate.
Oh, I can't reach this. Oh, I don't. You can hear me fine. I have a question. I guess it might be kind of for Cynthia and for Jim. How are we teaching kids how to use the computers? I mean, there are. I'm seeing it at the elementary level, like we're starting to introduce in the classroom, and obviously the teachers know what some of the programs are trying to teach the kids to use, and we also have STEM at Pownell is what I'm thinking, where they are using the computers. But then we make the leap to middle school, and it's time to like type reports and things like that, and I'm seeing my child not know how to type. So I'm just wondering, it just seems like there's this kind of third leg to the stool that we don't have yet, where we are integrating it into the curriculum and teaching them how to use the hardware correctly. And I'm just wondering, is that something that we have or are looking at putting in place as some way to make sure that students are learning the proper way to use the laptops? I'm just like really focused on the typing. I mean, that's an issue. I don't want to see my kid hunting and pecking to write a lab report. And I'm like telling them to go online and use the typing program, and you better learn how to type. And I don't really think that's my role as a parent to teach my child how to type.
We're looking at Will.
We're looking at Will because he has the pre-K-8 look and he's closest to it. So I don't know if you can, I don't want him to put you on the spot, but we will. But we will.
I clearly heard Kate say, this is a question for Cynthia and Jim.
But Will, maybe you're the third leg of the stool.
That's probably the nicest thing I've been called today. So it is not a clean answer, and what your experience is not untypical. So there's a little bit of history to it, and then there's sort of a blank. So what shifted there? We really didn't used to focus on keyboarding until the children got their laptops, because access is everything. Then a few years ago, when the state assessments, when the MEA was Smarter Balance, it shifted from paper and pencil assessments to computer-based. And the children then are expected to complete these assessments on computers, which they haven't really had a whole ton of access to, because as we talked about, they have class once a week, and our focus is necessarily around the keyboarding, because there's all these other aspects. So then a few years ago, we added in keyboarding in grades 3 through 5, really with the perspective of making sure children were able to access these assessments, the tests. And we were using typing power, I think it was. I can look in a minute what the actual one was. Students were set up, they had access that they would use at school and use at home, but finding the time to do it at school where the computers were accessible, we found really prohibitive. So, I mean, children were doing it for maybe 25 minutes a week or something, which was just negligible. So we don't quite have an answer, Kate. It's a good question. I don't think that, it's amazing to me how actually by 8th grade the children are really incredibly quick on the computers. I'm not sure they type or keyboard in the way that one should, but they are pretty adept at doing it. So that's not to suggest that's the answer, but that's kind of the history. If you have any other questions for Cynthia and Jim, I'll put them back on.
No, thank you. That answers part of my question, because I did notice, like, my daughter, who's a couple years behind my son, she's like, well, I have an account, I know how to type,
Right.
I'm learning how to
Right.
type. But, so, I mean, that explains maybe the gap that I'm seeing between the two
Well, they all had
kids.
that, and again, it really is a piece of like, access is that piece,
Yeah.
right? So, it may be there's a piece there where we have to look back at 6th grade and sort of say, okay, so what happens there?
Right.
They are very quick to understand the software, but just the keyboarding and actual typing skills.
Yes, right.
Is I think what we're discussing.
Yeah, because I don't think as teachers are using different software and programs in the classroom, I'm not seeing that the children are having any issues picking up on that at all.
Right.
I mean, like you said, they're very quick learners and they know this stuff better than us, but it's when it comes down to having to do like the nuts and bolts of writing a report and you're relying upon your computer so much more in 6th grade than you were in elementary school, that there's this big jump that I'm not sure we're preparing the 6th graders to take. I mean, even if it was something where we gave each of the middle schoolers an account somehow that they could practice on their own for the keyboarding, the same that we do for the younger grades, that might even help substantially, so they could practice.
Well, I think we'll bring it back to when we have an administrative meeting and sort of, share the concern and talk about it there, and then hopefully.
I'm curious if our student rep has any thoughts on this. As he's clearly made it through middle school and into high school.
Just barely through middle school and high school, but I got there. So I did use a couple of typing like trainers throughout middle school, and I'm not quite sure. I did not grow up in my early years in Freeport. I used to go to a Catholic school in Illinois, actually, and we put like these pieces of like plastic that were fit to the keyboard, and they would like measure your speed and train you to type without looking, and I'm not quite sure any data or anything on that, but definitely I feel like the majority of the people that surround me and type around me in high school are pretty sufficient, do quite well with typing. I've never really seen it as a problem in high school. I guess I didn't really pay too much attention to that in middle school, and I haven't been around elementary students, so I'm not quite sure really like what to do about the situation, but that's what I know.
Don't worry, I wasn't expecting you to solve the problem for us. If you had a solution, we'll hear it, but I was just curious if you had, if just anecdotally you had heard from people that they felt like, gosh, I have all these great ideas, but can't type them fast enough because they never taught me how to type. I think it's one of those things, and I mean, even kid to kid might be different, right? Age groups may impact it too, but I can certainly see one of my kids being more proficient at typing than the other, just by their personalities. So I don't think we have typing class anymore where they put the paper over your hand and ASDF. So anyway, Jeremy.
Just think it's great that we're spending so much time with the geeks. This is awesome. So,
Come on back up, Will.
But did just you had made the point about starting to move servers out of local hosting and moving it to the cloud, and definitely support that. Was working with a school district literally today where they had ransomware on their payroll server, so it's unlikely their teachers are going to get paid this week due to that. So they were hosting locally there. So just want to kind of echo that. They talked about the incident response planning, and do we do like incident response tabletop testing to say what happens if Trevor goes in with a big knife and starts cutting cables? Do we have incident like planning for that for issues that could come up?
We're going to. Okay?
Yep.
As I said, you sent me to a security conference a few weeks back. I'm in my 3rd month, and we are definitely going to be addressing that.
That's great. Yep.
Yeah, put that slide back up.
Put the babies up.
Yep.
So.
But yes, I mean, that's certainly, along with some of the policy that Cynthia and I have worked on that's come before you, yes, I mean, that's certainly incident response. I've got a cache of emails based on different things that could happen so that I can have a rapid send out of notification. We definitely are thinking about it. But, you know, the ounce of prevention, right, moving forward and spending resources and time to get hosted systems and make sure that our policies are in line and that they're, you know, one of the things that the Maine Technology Association is doing is making sure that companies like Google and that have the correct safeguards that we need. And it's not only us signing off on them, we want them to sign off on us. So we're working with Drummond Woodsum and Maine School Management to make sure that this type of thing happens. So yes, we definitely have an eye on it.
Thank you.
Valley.
So Jim, I had more questions about the STEM curriculum, and I need a little clarification too to see how you interface with curriculum. Is your department in any way involved in creating technology and STEM curriculum for the schools?
Not currently.
Is that something that is in the wings, or?
There are some discussions.
Okay.
I mean, first of all, the first step is making sure that we have technicians that can back up STEM teachers so that if they need another set of hands or if they need technology, we're there to support that. That's new. Moving forward, we're going to have discussions on what curriculum looks like.
Okay. And as far as the space that the students would need to work in to deliver the curriculum, are the STEM classrooms under your budget now, or are they under each
The classrooms
building
are not.
budget?
Will, come on up.
The STEM classrooms are a part of the classroom structure. The teachers are under the sort of regular curriculum model, and as our sort of materials and the facility space. So there is a separation of sort of technical support and infrastructure, and then on our side of it, it's around sort of curriculum and instruction.
And the actual hardware? Say if you have a 3D printer, who pays for it? Does technology pay for it, or does the building pay for it?
We would request that as part of our equipment budget.
Okay.
In the budget.
Under your building
Yeah.
request, okay.
But there are crossovers. So you gave an example of 3D printer. You heard Jim share about the audio system with Lightspeed or projectors. That kind of equipment comes through Jim's side of infrastructure, whereas a 3D printer would be more of a curriculum aspect. It's not like every school or classroom needs that. You'd need to have an instructor who uses that as part of their program to sort of show the difference.
So how many of the schools actually do have a dedicated space for STEM? How many STEM classrooms do we have in the district?
So STEM is, did you want me to keep going? Yeah, okay. The STEM classrooms really evolved out of, we used to have computer class, right, or computer lab. And that program morphed into STEM over the last few years. And then really the other part that went with that is sort of along with what you may or may not have heard of in terms of like the maker movement, which is really around children creating, and we used to refer to it as cardboard engineering. They're not going to have the time or exposure to get into really sophisticated making until they get up to maybe the high school level. But in terms of like three-dimensional problem solving, that's sort of the emphasis of the STEM work. And then when STEM got added in with the science expectations around science and engineering standards, again, what sort of embedded it on the curriculum side of the equation. So there's STEM programming at every school, and it was sort of reworked space. So like Kate was saying at Pownell, the computer lab at Pownell has become the STEM lab. So there's still computers there, but there's also like maker activities and resources and space within that space. So it's at each of the schools.
At each of the schools, okay. Perfect.
I wanted to say that I really like the idea about partnering with the community ed piece, about support times for community members. I think that's a great outreach, and I know that's uses your time, and time is a finite commodity, but I think it's a great great opportunity to reach out to the community and provide some support and things that you guys are clearly very good at, and most of us are not. So
Thank you.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, Maura.
Actually, since Michelle mentioned that, the group, the programming, well, I guess they're game creation and programming clubs, but if you could even get students involved in somehow, doing that component of it, if you had students who were skilled enough, it might be a nice way for them to give back.
Yeah, that's our intent.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great.
Can't wait till I can have my kid fix my computer for me. Sure.
So Jim, how did you decide that the game creation and programming clubs would be at the high school and Mass Landing?
So we're starting there based on the technician that's capable of doing it. Kyle Jackson, who was just recently hired, went to college for programming games and that type of skill. And he is currently in the high school filling that role. And so we thought we would start there. And there's an active group at Mass Landing where he is also supporting them. And so it's following him. It's not based on anything other than that. It's going to be a pilot. If it goes well, he can instruct the other techs on how to replicate it in the other schools.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. I feel like Ringo Starr up here. I got by with a little help from my friends.
Okay, so we are going to move on to adult recreation and community programs. Peter Wagner.
Good evening. For one glorious month this summer, I was the new guy on the administrative team until Kelly and Jim relieved me of that role. I am, however, still very much a new guy on the admin team and in my on the upward side of the learning curve. What I'm going to do this evening, if it's okay, is go through the highlights of the report that I prepared for you and then call out some illustrative examples, perhaps, of some of the points that I've made there. Our office is, the Office of Community Programs is itself also a pretty young team. The senior person in community programs is Kelly Park, who is our adult education coordinator. She's been with the group for about 5 years. Sarah Cass has been there for about 2 years, as has Chris Garrett, who is our recreation coordinator. Bridget Anderson, our childcare coordinator, has been there for a little over a year, and I started in July. So there has been some change in that office in the recent past, and those folks are really skilled, really super individuals, great professionals, really committed to the mission of our office and strengthening our community. And I'm thankful to be working with them. And on a personal level, for me, my family's relatively new to Freeport. We moved to this community in 2014, and the opportunity for me this year to come back and have my entire life right here in this community, and to have the work that I do benefit my community is really meaningful. And so I sincerely hope that as my time in the office moves on, that excitement is reflected in the work and progress that our office is able to make. So when I did begin in the office in July, our staff got together in August for a day-long retreat to talk about priorities and who we wanted to be as an operation, what we wanted to be, how we wanted to be viewed within the community. Interestingly enough, that was about 6 or 7 weeks into my tenure, and it was the first time that the 5 of us on the team had been together. The summer months are really interesting in the community programs office. That's when things really get ramped up for the team, and folks are out in the field with the summer camps and on trips and all sorts of activities that are happening. So we spent a really good day together in August to talk about who we wanted to be and what we wanted our priorities and goals to be for the year. And it's been interesting over the last few weeks working with other members of the administrative team and talking to other office directors. There are some real commonalities between the goals that we set and the goals that other offices have set as well. We very much want to be a model of excellent customer service, both internally and externally, being responsive and proactive with the sort of service that we provide to all sorts of people across Durham, Freeport, and Pownell. We are doing a comprehensive communications audit about what are the communications that we send out as a matter of course, how are we reaching out to our participants, families, and stakeholders that are taking part in our programs. And what we want to do is to have a really thorough plan that covers all of our bases, leaves very little left to chance, and making sure that we are doing a super job of communicating with folks before, during, and after any of the programs that we offer, whether it's recreation, childcare, or adult education. And we very much want to move towards being an innovative organization as well. I sense from looking at, well, twice a year, we print a sort of flagship publication catalog that is mailed out to everyone in the community, which details the classes and courses and sports and offerings that are happening over a 6-month period. And I think that there may have been over the last few years just sort of a, well, we've done it in the past, so let's pull it forward, change the dates, put it into the catalog. And in querying some folks around town and other community members, I have gotten some feedback that we really want to receive that catalog and want to open it because we're excited to see what's new. That maybe has been lacking a little bit. So innovation is the name of the game. Not just what are people bringing to us and saying, I'd like to teach this class, but looking at what we are offering and saying, what are we missing? And asking people, what are we missing? And trying to suit those needs and fill those voids. So those are our 3 main goals for the year. To just give some updates and highlights of the 3 areas of our operation, we were without a learning lab instructor. Learning labs are basically the classroom experience for our adult education program, and it's necessary for preparing these adult learners before they take their high-set tests towards their equivalency exams. And so without that learning lab instructor through some of the spring and summer, we were a little bit dead in the water. We didn't have much to offer our learners, but thankfully we hired a great new person, Rodney Richard, who has picked up this fall and is doing a great job with our learners. Kelly Park, our adult ed coordinator, has also added a facet to her work with our office. She now is a second learning lab instructor and counselor for those adult learners. So our high-set and learning lab operation is going really well right now. We have about 8 folks who are attending on a regular basis. We have more people enrolled in our programs, but 8 who are regulars, and we anticipate that by June 30th we will have 6 people who have completed their full battery of high-set tests and will be eligible for their equivalency by the end of the year. Also, Trace Salter came on board last year as our English teacher, our ESOL instructor. Her classes are full right now and going great. We've been working on some programming that we would like to describe as programs for new Mainers. It is contingent on having sort of themed months of learning where the students are not just learning language, but learning language within the context of that month's theme. So maybe it's healthcare for the individual or their family. Maybe it's commerce and the marketplace. Maybe it's civics and government and citizens' responsibilities and rights, for instance. So we're looking at having themed months where the students can learn in that context. And some of the great news is that 3 of our ESOL students have gained their United States citizenship recently, which is, we are not the linchpin of that, but we are certainly a part of the process, and we're very proud of them and very excited for them. And in fact, on March the 7th at 5:30 at the Community Services Center on Depot Street, we will have a celebration of all of our adult learners to recognize the people who have completed their high-set equivalency testing and to also celebrate our English learners and our new citizens, and just to to highlight and celebrate the great accomplishments that we make through those programs. So I will be sending an invitation to the board, and I hope you might join us. In the world of recreation, one of the great changes this year, or one of the great developments this year, I think symbolically, if nothing else, is that the Durham athletics operation has come over to RSU 5 community programs. It has grown our numbers greatly, and I think it just brings some additional cohesion to our 3 towns within the community, which is a great indicator. With the addition of Durham players, our soccer league grew by about 45%, or almost 100 players this fall. Basketball is considerably larger this winter as well, and so we're very excited to be incorporating them all as part of the same RSU 5 athletic family. Always, but especially with the addition of Durham into that program with team sports, we really strive to meet everyone's expectations about what a great recreation and athletic program can be. The childcare operation is the third leg of what we do in community programs. Camp Seaside this past year was once again a great operation, large and vibrant, upwards of 50 kiddos taking part in that summer-long program. One of the really important developments is happening in the summer of 2019, and I think that this will make a lot of folks happy. Some feedback that we have received over time is that the K through 5 cohort was all a part of Camp Seaside in one big group, and this year we're going to split K through 2 and 3 through 5 into 2 separate groups. It all will still be based at Mass Landing School, but we'll be able to add a little bit of staff and have much more targeted programming for the younger kiddos and the older ones. So I think that will be a really positive development in that regard. And so we're looking forward to seeing how that change will affect the program. Laugh and Learn, which is our year-long but school year particularly flagship program, is going really strong this year in its 3 centers. We have before and after care here at Durham. We have before and after care at Mass Landing School, and then we have before and after care, but also the preschool program at Moore Street School. All of those spaces are filled to capacity with waiting lists, so those are looking really good. One of the interesting and exciting features of the program at Moore Street School is that we hired this year 3 Freeport High School students to be employees there, not just tagging along, but we have Sam, Susanna, and Caitlin who are full parts of that team now, and they really add a great element to the care for the kids and the mentoring that they receive. So we're very, very proud of that development as well. In regard to operations and staffing, there was a question from the board about that particular part of my report. So there is clearly a pinch for staffing, not just in community programs at RSU 5, but in other places across our own school department, but across the state of Maine as well. People are having a hard time finding substitute teachers for the classroom. They're having a hard time finding bus drivers, and we in community programs are having some of the same struggles. We're looking for substitutes for our Laugh and Learn program because pretty regularly there are call-outs, and we need to have staff to be able to go in to maintain our legal ratios of providers to kiddos. We've also had a vacant position for about a year for a recreation programs supervisor, which would be a part-time second hand in the recreation department to help with planning, help with scheduling, to help with on-site management of team sports particularly. And so I think we're looking for some creative ways to solve that, and we need to go out and find some opportunities to recruit specific individuals instead of waiting passively for people to find our job postings. So we're looking at employees across the RSU who are less than 1.0 FTE to see if there are people who are looking to get additional hours in some ways that we might be able to leverage those resources, and also thinking creatively for the rec position about young Freeport High School graduates who are perhaps commuting college students, and are they looking for part-time work that they can fit in with their studies. So we're hopeful that that this, in the coming months, we'll be able to fill all those positions so that we're well covered. The last thing I would like to call out as a real priority for me individually, as I've come into the office this year, is partnerships across the RSU, but across our community as well. And I've spent quite a bit of time, particularly this summer and early this fall, meeting with the directors of various nonprofits around the area, most notably the Freeport Public Library, Freeport Community Services, the Freeport Historical Society, the YMCA, and looking for ways that we can better understand each other's operation, find ways that we can cooperate, collaborate, and sort of fit in a more complementary way so that we're not necessarily competing with each other. We have a lot of the same audiences. We have, in some ways, the same mission to serve the community, and so looking for some opportunities to work together there. I've also started meeting every other month with each of the building principals at the RSU 5 schools, which is just it's a great way for me to get to know colleagues and to also have an ear much closer to the families that are such an important part of the schools. And just as a couple of examples, through those conversations, we had ideas come forth where we were able to start a middle school tennis program this fall, which was hugely successful. A middle school mountain biking program, which was a great hit, and we will look to continue next year as well. We are looking at finding ways to sort of be an extension of the curricular day for the schools. So we're talking about resources that are available for keyboarding classes, or places where the folks at Mass Landing or even Moore Street School might want to teach foreign language to the kids at that age, but just don't have the time in the day or the resources to do it. So in having those conversations with building principals, it's an opportunity for us in community programs to maybe provide some of the things that they would otherwise want to provide during the academic day, but for whatever reason can't. But maybe we could have it as sort of an extra enrichment sort of program. So language is one of those opportunities, and keyboarding is something I hadn't thought of, but in the conversation tonight, that might be a way that we could help if it can't necessarily be offered as a regular class in school. So so there's some good ideas there. And Jim mentioned some partnership that we're looking for with technology resources and finding some ways for community programs and technology to work together. Craig and I have been working with some cooperative programs with athletics, and so those partnerships are I think super important to make us all better, and I'm looking forward to carrying those on. And then finally, I'll just point out that Jeremy and I have started the conversation about a community programs advisory committee, which again will better inform the work that we do by involving more folks around our 3 towns. And sometimes the wheels of progress move slowly, so but we're getting there. So I look forward to getting that off the ground as well. So that's what I have for you, but I would be very happy to answer any questions.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to say thank you so much for reaching out to everyone else who's replicating the work that you're doing. And I think it's brilliant to go to the principals and ask them what the parents are asking for, as a way to complement, supplement, or enrich the educational experience. So thank you.
Great. Yeah, sure. No, it's really been fascinating. I mean, it's helped me learn my job and the work of the RSU a whole lot better. I mean, I'm new to this industry. This is new work for me. So it's been a great part of my learning experience. But what better sounding board than the folks who are really immersed with both the adults and the kids in the community every single day. Yeah.
But you're the first to do it, so.
Okay. Well, thanks.
Being new to the business is a good thing.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thanks. Well, is there anything that Will can answer? No. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Okay, so athletics, Mr. Sickles.
Good evening and welcome to the 3 school board members that I haven't had a chance to stand before, so welcome to the school board. There's 3 documents in your packet, and then I have a couple other things that I'd like to follow up on that you don't have information on. So the first piece is just our participation numbers, historically where they were and where they are now. It's interesting to note that it looks like, at both Durham Middle School and Freeport Middle School, the numbers fluctuate a little bit more than the consistency at the high school, and that's just because there's 2 classes worth of numbers, and you get 1 class that doesn't have a whole lot of participants, and it certainly sways the numbers as opposed to at the high school. But at the high school, the last couple of years, our numbers have kept increasing as far as participation. We had 242 kids participate in a fall sport this fall, and that by far is our highest number. The Durham numbers have constantly grown, and I think one is the job that some of our coaches are doing, and 2, I think providing the Durham students with an opportunity in the fall for football and field hockey that they didn't have prior to, and then in the spring an opportunity for lacrosse. And of course now with the track in the backyard and here in our community, our track numbers are going to do nothing but grow. So we have healthy participation, high participation numbers, and so that's always nice to see. So the second page, it certainly was a special time this fall, and not just because of all of the success, and historically it is a historic season. I don't remember a fall or a season where every single team that we had qualified for postseason play. But I think it's more than that. We opened the track last spring with a great opening on our home track with the dedication, and there could have been 1,000 people there, and we played night lacrosse games. But this fall had a different feel to it. It really was special. Home games were so much more than that. Home games were community events. Home games were a community gathering place. I saw alumni and parents whose kids graduated years ago who came back and watched games. And that doesn't happen when varsity games start at 3:30 in the afternoon. It just doesn't. And so, to see that energy and to see that feel, it just was something that I think had been missing, and it's good to see that we have, and thank so many people to make that happen. So I won't go down through all of these accomplishments, but again, football was #1 seed. We recognize them tonight as Class E champions. The boys soccer was #2. They were the South Regional champions and participated in the state championship game with weather that was worse than the football game, I might add. Field hockey played in a regional championship game, not quite as successful as they'd like to be. Soccer, golf, cross country all did just fantastic. So coaches did a great job. Students, as always, go above and beyond, and it was just, I was very proud to be a part of it. The last page, I thought you might be interested in this. So we took admissions, we sold admissions to most all home games. There is the total attendance. You can probably add anywhere from 50 to 100 to those, because the JV parents and the JV kids who come for a 4:15 or 4:30, we don't start charging admission for the 6 o'clock varsity game until about 5:30. So there's probably anywhere on any given night 50 to maybe even 150 more folks who are actually in the facility before we start to take attendance. The track and turf use guidelines calls for a committee to be formed. That committee to be made up neighbors, a representative from the neighborhood, representatives from the school, and representatives from the town. So I've reached out to the neighbor who was on the Tri-Town Track and Field committee. He's gathering information from the neighbors. Peter Wagner is going to join me as a representative from the school, and Officer Goodman, who is the person that I go through to hire the police details for our home games. So the 4 of us will be meeting soon to just review how it went from the neighbor's perspective. I will tell you that we have a three-tiered parking plan that was part of the planning board's condition of approval. And for every football game and soccer playoff game, we used Tier 3. And that included sandwich boards out on Main Street to direct people for parking. It also included 2 barricades, one on Nathan Nye and one on Snow Road, to keep spectators from driving through the community. We didn't have to because we didn't reach that 750 threshold, but I felt that the first year we wanted to make sure that we did things right and that the community, the neighborhood community felt respected, and we tried to do our best to make that happen. The field use guidelines also say that no game can start later than 6, and just so you're aware, one of our soccer playoff games had to be played on Halloween night, and so the police called with a concern because the biggest time, of course, in downtown is from 3:30 to 6:30, and by MPA rules and policy, we couldn't move it to Thursday, and it was already past playing it earlier on Tuesday, so we had to play it on Wednesday, and I suggested playing earlier, and that would have been worse, and so I suggested, we can move it to 7 if that'll help, but you need to know that doesn't abide by the town's our guidelines of use. But if you, the police, tell me I have to move it because of public safety, I will move that. So they actually met with the town manager and the chief of police, and they did call and say, yeah, we think that's a good idea for kids and student safety. So we didn't get any complaints about a 7 o'clock game start, and so I'm anxious to get that community together and get some feedback from the community. Really happy to announce that our website, you folks may have got the emails, our website now is going to be has two new options. One, our website, each of our varsity coaches, well, actually each of our coaches can have their own page and send out and communicate with parents and students. The middle school was using Team Snap, and so our website now has the ability to do pretty much the exact same thing Team Snap does. Parents have to register to get the alerts for whatever team their child or childs are on, but we're piloting that this winter. There's certainly going to be a learning curve to that, so I'm kind of anxious to see how that goes. So now it's one-stop shopping. Not only is that where you go for schedules, it's also where you go to get information from your coach about, today's practice is canceled, wear green tomorrow for a team thing, pizza party, whatever. The other thing is that our website now, parents are able to sync whatever schedule they want, their child's schedule, to their personal computers, and I know that was a big thing that Team Snap had that our website didn't, and so I think our website host, which is Big Teams, I think they were feeling the crunch, and I think the next thing to come out of Big Teams is going to be a mobile app too as well, so I think that's coming down the line because that's what's out there and that's what they need to do to keep up. So the other thing I'd like to touch on is a year ago when I stood here, we talked a little bit about coach evaluation and the hiring process. Every varsity coach is evaluated, has a written evaluation done by me on every other year, and in the off year they provide me with a self-evaluation. We sit down and we go through both of those on both of those years. At that time, let me back up a minute. While I'm doing those evaluations on the varsity coaches every other year with a self-eval in the off year, the varsity coaches are doing written evaluations on their sub-varsity coaches on and every other year, and the sub-varsities are providing them with a self-eval as well. So when I evaluate a varsity coach, those the methods and criteria are the 6 things that I look at in that process. Each individual coach or program has their own goals and expectations and what needs to be what needs to be improved, what they're doing well, some of the help that they might need to be able to get. For one example, we have one varsity and JV coach that are pretty new to coaching, and so through the evaluation process at the end of the year, we agreed that they both would take an online sport-specific coaching course. In addition, I asked them to, in the preseason, go and visit a couple college preseason practices, just so they can see how something like that is organized and what can they take away. On a larger scale, an all-encompassing goal for all of our varsity coaches is what's called the varsity coaches supervisory responsibility. It's the notion and expectation that each varsity coach is their sports curriculum coordinator, and what's taught and how it's taught, what's the progressions, what do kids need to know before they come to high school, those types of things, skills, drills, and terminology. And when Peter and I met for the first time, that was one of the things that he and I discussed is, how can we get our high school kids, how can we get our college, our coaches more involved so that flow and continuity and those conversations and terminology and skills and drills start to, that foundation starts to get laid. And so certainly some sports lend itself to that better than others. I would say basketball and football are on the high end. Cross-country running would probably be on the low end. And certainly if you're a first-year varsity coach, like our girls varsity basketball coach, this is his first year here, so for me to expect him to do curriculum coordinator stuff his first year as opposed to a veteran coach of 5, 7, 10 years. So, so everybody's at a different little place with that happening. So that's an overarching goal for the entire program. And as Peter said, it's part of our RSU athletic family. And so we're trying to foster that and, create some connections and, hiring coaches, particularly middle school and sub-varsity, is very hard. People are not knocking down doors, and we often don't hire middle school coaches or first-team coaches or JV coaches until days before the season starts. And so one of the things the varsity coaches say is, well, I don't have time to work with them. And so one of my responses is, well, but you need to create a booklet. You need to create something, because those people who are hired with a day to get ready need more from you than someone that you've spoken to 3 times throughout the summer. So, you need to put together some type of support for them, whether it's practice plans or skills and drills. You give them 10 or 12 drills and say, I want you to do 5 of these every day. So that's the type of support we're trying to look for our middle school coaches and as well as our youth coaches as well. All of our varsity vacant positions are advertised outside. All of our varsity vacant positions, we go through an interview process with an interview team. The team consists of myself, another administrator, parents, coaches who are already on staff, and we've even had teachers as well. So that happens every time we have a varsity opening. All the other openings, sub-varsity, we don't get a committee together because it's usually 1, maybe 2 candidates, and the varsity coach and myself interview the sub-varsity coaches. The middle school coaches at Freeport Middle School are done by myself as well. The middle school coaches here at Durham are done by, they're interviewed and hired by the middle school assistant AD here. That's all I have for you, unless you, the other document I just passed around, this is the actual evaluation form and checklist that's used for the varsity coaches. And this is the same form that they use when they do a self-eval as well.
Okay, thank you. Jeremy?
Just bring up kind of an old issue from last year, maybe 2 years ago. How did the hockey transport Did that work itself out, or?
It-
we had-
Well, it did. They all found transportation. No one didn't play because they didn't. We're still continuing with the co-op boys ice hockey with South Portland and Waynfleet. We're actually in discussions with Portland, with South Portland. South Portland, we co-opt with them because there was a need. Anytime a school has a need, that's an opportunity for a co-op. And they had a need, and they didn't have enough kids. So now after, how many years have we been co-opting with them? 3, 4? I think we're at year at least 4. Their numbers have started to grow. And some of the South Portland parents are saying, why do we need Freeport and Waynfleet now? We have our own kids. So that's going to be an interesting play when this season is over, because this is the last year of a 2-year agreement. So I know our parents have called me. They have a concern. I reached out to Yarmouth. Yarmouth, for the boys, has not been a willing partner in the past, basically because of the Maine Principals Association's co-op enrollment numbers. In prior years, when you co-opt with a team, with another school, both schools' total enrollments were counted, and you were placed wherever it was. And so Yarmouth and our enrollment are such that if we co-opt at that time, they would go from B to A. And for 3 or 4 kids, or 5 or 6, it wasn't worth them losing their traditional B classification and their traditional opponents and rivalries to go to a new class. A year or so ago, the Maine Principals Association changed the co-op enrollment configurations. So now you have a designated receiving school and a designated sending school. And so the sending school, you count the number of players on the team that are from your school. So let's say that the ice hockey team had 10 players. We send 2 of them. They're only going to count 20% of our enrollment now. So now, using that new math, Yarmouth/Freeport would stay in Class B. So they might be a little bit more open to making that happen. But getting back to your transportation question, it hasn't been, I don't think it's been an issue for kids not being able to play. And of course, our girls co-op with Yarmouth, which is a lot easier to get to right down the road.
Hello. How much do you charge for admission to the football games? And are the football games the only ones that we charge for?
So when we had night games for the first time, I polled our Western Maine Conference, and none of the schools charged admission for spring lacrosse, boys or girls. The answer when I said why, the answer I got back is, well, the lights aren't on, and the lights aren't on. When I asked them about their fall sports, the lights seemed to be the key, and we charged admission for the same sports that everybody else charged. We charged admission for boys and girls soccer and football. We did not charge for field hockey, and I said why, and they said, well, we have a hard enough time getting kids and students and parents to come to field hockey games. When we first had our first couple of field hockey games, the attendance was low, but I think because of the energy that surrounded soccer and football, our field hockey, we had a couple of field hockey home games with as big a crowds as we did soccer. So the only reason we didn't charge the field hockey is because no one else was in our conference, and I was doing what everybody else was doing. We charged $3 for adults and $1 for students and seniors.
Where do those funds go?
Those funds are given to the central office, and they are placed in an account that will be accrue over years to help offset the cost for the turf replacement and track resurfacing.
So when this was all presented before and they were going to do the tracks, we were told that the money that we saved in doing this would be used for that purpose. is it not enough? I mean, do we need to raise more funds for redoing the field and track when it's time?
I don't remember anyone saying that the money we save on the track, are you talking maintenance?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't believe anyone said the money we save on the maintenance would go towards the replacement of the track and turf. I don't remember that being a part of the compensation.
I can speak to that for a second.
Sure.
We are putting aside what we were paying for grass maintenance and those sort of things into a fund to cover for those same things in the future. So I think it was just another way to try and make sure we have enough for all of those. I mean, you know, we can figure out how much we're spending now and almost guarantee it will cost more 10 years or 12 years from now than what it does today, right? So, you know, putting money aside into those sinking funds. And I also thought that some of the funds went to the boosters, like football went, because football has always charged for football, even at Pownell Road Fields. Is that correct?
When football was at Pownell Road Field, they charged admission and they kept admission. No, all the admission charge this year went into the central office fund.
Okay, so it's not going to. So, I mean, it's not completely unheard of that we charge for games and,
I was just wondering where it went. So
Yeah.
the boosters do their own thing? Do they run the
concessions?
The concession stand?
Boosters run the concession.
Okay.
They do 50-50 raffles. They did some other fun events to get students there. Basketball's a whiteout. They had a neon night. We actually had a couple of neon nights where if kids wore neon, they got in free. I will say that never having fall night games before, we never had a student section. We do at basketball because the games are at 7 o'clock and people can get there. But the student sections this fall were just amazing. And I have to say the comments that I got, our student section was more sportsmanlike than any other visiting student section that came. So that was nice to hear.
Thank you.
Maddie.
It was really an exciting season. Thank you for your part in that. And thank you also for bringing the materials to sort of reflect back on our questions last year around evaluation and around hiring. And I know there was some turnover in coaches over this last year, so it's I appreciate having an update on that. I have an unrelated question. But it's sort of tangentially related to what you were just saying about students. So I'm very proud to be part of a district where we are equally facile in the athletics and the arts, and we're also known for our students are known for their good attitudes, their positive attitudes. I recently have heard that there are some MPA rules around if students miss practice or a game. I'm not going to get this right.
No, it's called the MPA bona fide team rule. And it's been around for probably at least 6 years, if not more. And what the MPA bona fide team rule states, and it really came about because of swimming and skiing. Those were the first two that really stood out, but then the more schools spoke and the more the discussion, it really just wasn't those two sports because of the proliferation of travel teams and club teams and weekend tournaments in Rhode Island. So what the MPA policy says is that a student who misses a school-sponsored practice or game to go play a sport outside of the school practice or game that the MPA sponsors, they have a one-time pass. So if you're on the basketball team and there's practice Friday night and Saturday and you have to leave to go to a soccer tournament in Rhode Island and you're now missing school practice and games for a club that's out of season that's impacting your school, then they're calling that the bona fide team rule. And so you get one pass The second time it happens, the Maine Principals Association says you're suspended from one game. The third time that happens, they're saying you're done for the season. So that's not our rule, that's a Maine Principals Association rule.
Yeah, and I could certainly understand why. My question is around students who would miss for a school-related activity in the arts, like an all-states music festival or a district's audition, because I have heard in some instances students have been punished even though they're at an event that is considered a school event. It's not a sporting event, but we have these kids who will play in teams and they're also involved in the arts.
Sure. So I think to use the word punish is kind of strong.
It is.
Having spent 22 years as a boys varsity basketball coach, the day before a game is a pretty crucial game because we go over the opponent's tendencies. We may watch film from our last game against them, who's left-handed, who's right-handed, what are their out-of-bounds plays. And so if a student's not there, even if they're the best player I have, and they're missing that opportunity, and the next day's the game, he's probably not going to start, not because he's being punished, but because he missed what we just went over, and there needs to be a learning on his part to see what we've gone over. And so he'll sit for a while. He might sit next to the assistant coach, and that assistant coach then might talk about what are the things that he missed, and oh, did you see that type of thing. So there will be consequences. You know, if they're a starter, they're probably not going to start, but they're not going to sit out the entire game. But I think it's not so much being punished as, you know, putting the team in the best place to be successful so that everybody who's out there is on the same page. And if you miss the practice the day before a game, you know, when I was the coach, that was a pretty big deal, and you weren't going to be on the same page if you didn't have that information that we covered that day before.
Yeah, I'll just, you know, anecdotally, the example you use sounds much worse than what I have heard. And I would just ask for maybe a little bit of scrutiny of where this might be happening, specifically related to the arts and school-related arts events for our students that do participate in both. And I mean, certainly if there were a student taking advantage of that situation and causing some problem to happen on the team or with their band or whatever, then that should be addressed. But I'm very proud of being part of a district that values both very highly, and I would just love to see a little bit more leniency in these kinds of instances that I'm talking about.
Sure.
Thanks.
And it sounds like from the rule, from the MPA rule, that's specific to sports, right?
Right. So if that same student was going to miss Friday practice and a game on Saturday because they were going to a horseback riding event, the MPA bona fide team rule would not come into effect because the MPA does not sponsor horseback riding. So it would fall back on the coach's rule. You know, if you miss a game in a practice, what's my rule? So that's a little bit different.
Right. I mean, to me, that seems reasonable, right? I mean, you make the decision which is your priority for that day, and you live with the consequences of, okay, I'm not starting tomorrow, but I still got to do both events. I mean, the MPA rule seems like it could be, you know, even if the coach is okay with it, it sounds like they don't have that choice, right? The rule is if you miss it, you get one pass, and then you miss a game, which is, I mean, it is harsh, but I mean, I understand it.
Right. So I mentioned it started with skiing. What was the other sport I mentioned? Skiing and swimming. So what was happening in skiing is students were going away to ski schools for the winter, Kiribati Valley Academy, and then when the state championship came in February, they would come back and ski for their high school in the state championship. And so now there's a ski rule that says you have to ski in 2 events, Nordic, in each of the disciplines, slalom and giant slalom, in order to be to ski in the state championship. And swimming was the same thing. A lot of the swimmers were swimming at the club level. When the state championship came, they'd come back and swim. But again, you know, soccer, there's huge soccer going on in the winter. There's huge soccer going on in the spring. And so it wasn't just And it's not just soccer. I mean, there's every sport that's played now out of season. Lacrosse is playing indoors, and so it was the movement of the Maine Principals Association to help support the school sports.
Yes, Lindsay.
Try my phone again, see what happens. I fully agree with Maddie's sentiment that we really should be having our sports and arts programming working together. I know everybody's really busy, but we don't want to be, regardless of the intention. I mean, I think the end result is that students can feel punished, even though it makes rational sense as you describe it. But I think it's not necessarily driven by rules, and could be equally driven by training to coaches and to students how to handle situations. So, for example, what is, say you have, do students get told like how to handle, like in the beginning of a season, if you're participating in something that conflicts with sports, like are you told as a student by your coach, like this is how I would like you to handle that? So and likewise, like with you and the coaches, like I think like a sort of statement at some point, early on in the season, that we as a district support both arts and athletics, and whenever possible, we try to work together to minimize conflicts when we can, when we have control, and when we don't have control, to not to make sure that students don't feel punished. And it has to do with communication, really, at the heart of it. A student being able to, say, hey, coach, I mean, I'm just guessing, I don't know about like a firm process, but like, hey, coach, I'm going to play, and these are the play dates, and I see that we have games, these are the conflicts, like, how can we work this out, before, so you're not the day before just not showing up. And the coach has the opportunity to say, oh, well, maybe I can do my strategy session the week before because, 10 students are in this play or whatever.
So I think we work really hard in scheduling to limit the number of conflicts as best we can. We reschedule all athletic events around concerts. We reschedule events around cabaret, all those big events. And so I do think over the years we've eliminated some of those simply by just changing our schedule. There are those all-star chorus District 3s that people audition for and win and get chosen. And one of the things that every coach will say to every team is, you know how to get a hold of me. I don't want to hear from John why you're not at practice today. Here's my contact information. You need to have some responsibility and let me know. And I don't know of a coach that doesn't do that. Clay, is that pretty much standard procedure when coaches talk to teams and say, let me know, here's my contact stuff, or not?
Yeah, definitely that would be a standard procedure. It's definitely a lot based on, your communication with the coach, and you definitely, like you said, you don't want to hear from a third party that you're not going to be at practice, and here's the reason why. Coaches definitely want to hear from you firsthand.
Changing subjects back to the hiring procedures and the evaluation. Thank you so much for bringing these two. And I wanted to find out, first of all, if you have any formal or informal way of collecting feedback from students and parents as in regards to coaches, because we've had
any formal
a lot
way,
of complaints in the past that there isn't just an easy way or an effective way for feedback to get communicated to you as the evaluator or the coaches.
I think the way that feedback would come to me regarding parental concerns about a coach would be the same way a principal would gather feedback about complaints or concerns about the teacher, that the parent would need to call or set up a meeting or email. You know, one of the things that one of the major things that I always talk about in preseason coaches meetings, and we have preseason parent meetings, we have those 3 times a year. And one of the things that I put up on my PowerPoint that's at least 2 slides, if not 3 slides long, is communicating. If you have an issue, if you see something that's not just right, if you hear something that's not just right, talk to us, and talk to us early. Don't sit in the bleachers and let it fester like a cancer, and don't wait till the end of the season, because by that time we can't do anything about it. So I really stress those parent preseason meetings that, you know, communication is the best way to be heard. And again, if you see something that's not just right, you hear something, you have a concern, call us immediately. Call the coach, call myself. I would prefer that they call the coach first, because that's where I'm going to have to go if you call me. And if it doesn't go well with the coach, you know, we can meet with the coach, myself, and a parent, or just with the parent. And you know, I think that communication is crucial, whether your child's in the classroom and you have a concern, or your child's on a team and you have a concern. You know, we're always open to receive communication from parents or students.
Thank you. The other question I had was about the hiring procedures. Under your point 2, it says when vacancies develop, and then you basically explain what happens, what the process is. The first bullet that you have is positions will be posted in-house to determine whether or not any present staff members have interest in the position.
Right, so that's part of the teacher contract that says any positions that are posted need to be posted in-house for a certain length of time. I think it's 2 weeks, and then from there we can go outside.
Yeah, my question was, in addition to posting in-house, I have no problem with that being done. I do have a problem sometimes when interest in the position is enough to have that person who has an interest be a coach. When does qualification come into play, and at what point do you decide I need to post this outside? Because yeah, there may be interest in-house, and it's easy to have someone there, but it's not, but there are others that are not varsity. So I'm asking about those others too. At what point do you decide there's interest, but there isn't enough qualification in-house?
That would be,
I will post.
So all varsity positions are posted in-house and out-of-house, if that's the correct term. Out-house. Sub-varsity and middle schools are posted in-house first. If we don't have a candidate who is qualified, who meets the job qualifications, job expectations as decided by myself and the other building administrator, then we'll advertise outside. I mean, our goal is to hire the best possible coaches we can, whether they're, you know, teachers or not. Our kids deserve the best coaches. One of my colleagues who is not in the business anymore at Falmouth, he always would say that if there are 2 candidates who are similar, and the teacher isn't quite as good a coach as maybe the outside with qualifications, that he would go with the teacher 100% of the times because of all the other things wrapped around coaching, the communication, that basketball is not just about basketball, and some of the life lessons that can be taught by a teacher. Now, does that mean every teacher who applies is going to get the job? Absolutely not. But if they're pretty equal, you know, the teacher's going to get it because they're right there. They have a bigger concept of educational athletics. We have some great outside coaches. We're very fortunate that they don't have blinders on. They don't just see basketball, or name whatever sport you want. They do a very nice job of seeing where their sport fits in, you know, to the overall educational process.
Could you speak to academic eligibility a little bit and how that was this fall?
So we have at the high school, actually at every school, the eligibility requirements I'm more familiar with the high school because I deal with that. My assistants at the middle school deal with the middle school. So at the high school, every student must be passing every course for which they are enrolled. That means for seniors and juniors, they're going by the 0 to 100, and they're just getting that 1 grade check in science, and it's for the quarter. We do it quarterly. You have to be passing for the quarter. In grades 9 and 10, they also have to be passing with a 70, but they also have to be passing habits of work with a 75. And we go right to Power School, and we pull grades off Power School, and we go by the grades. And so if they are failing at the high school, we pull grades on a Wednesday or Thursday, and I notify kids and parents on Thursday or Friday that if they're failing, they are placed on probation. Probation begins on Monday. The reason we delay it, we didn't used to have a delay. It used to go in just like that. And one year we had 12 kids on a boys' first team soccer team, and that Friday, 5 of them became ineligible and we couldn't play the game, so I had to call Falmouth and say, sorry, we're not coming today. Your kids lose out. You got to call the officials and cancel. So now by delaying that until Monday, now I can at least, 1, the coaches now have some time to plan. 2, if that happens, I now can give the school a heads up. Still not great, but that's why we delay it. So their probation starts on Monday. Probation means they can practice, but they can't play in games. That lasts for a week. The week is the minimum amount of time that they're on probation. On Friday, we do another grade check, and we actually, the students now go to the teachers and get a form signed. And if they're passing on Friday, then probation is lifted on the following Monday because it's a 7-day. And if they're still failing, then they get bumped up to suspension, which means now they can't practice or play for a week, and then we check it at the end of the week, and if they're passing, then they can come back to full participation.
And did that, I don't know if you know offhand, but how many students that impacts throughout the seasons?
This fall, I think we had 30 kids who went on academic probation. This year, for the first time, so every athletic season, the principal, assistant principal, and I meet with all the athletes together at once, and we explain the code of conduct, the eligibility policy, and I explained to them that this year, for the first time, we do have a little wrinkle into the eligibility policy. Kids were being identified as failing on that Wednesday or Thursday, but by Friday, they were passing because they had just forgot to do this or that, or it wasn't handed in yet. And so now they've got the email from me that says, you're on probation, and they go, oh. And so they go and they pass it in. So the new wrinkle is, if you're passing before probation starts on Monday, then you won't be on probation. And so when I mentioned that to the students this fall, it actually got a cheer. Because out of those 30 kids, I'm guessing at least 12 actually didn't go on probation because they just had something in their back pocket, or was in their folder, or they had forgotten to do, or forgotten to retake. So to keep a kid out of game for a week because they forgot to pass something in, and they've literally gone from 40s to 90s.
Okay, thank you.
Their backpack must have been full of done papers that they never handed in. How interesting. I'm sure. I'm sure it'll happen to my kid. I can see it happening already.
Last very quick question. What's the timeline for resurfacing the tennis courts?
Say that again?
And what is the timeline for resurfacing the tennis courts?
There is no time right now. I've asked for a couple different quotes to resurface it with asphalt, or resurface it, or I should say rebuild with asphalt, or rebuild with what's called post-tension concrete. The folks that put down our track, Cape and Island, are very highly looked at. They're one of the best in the business. They came and looked at our courts, and they don't do asphalt courts anymore. And he explained the reason why. So the asphalt that's used in roads and tennis courts literally comes from the bottom of the barrel. So when you get crude oil, and I don't know the entire science behind it, but when you get crude oil and you break it down for gas and heating oil and this, what's left goes to asphalt. Well, they have become so good, and the technique and science has become so much better that they now can extract more good stuff, leaving more bad stuff. So what's left is less pliable. So the roads and the tennis courts don't have that pliability, and so that's where you get the cracking. So they don't even do asphalt courts anymore, and you won't be able to get an asphalt court guaranteed by any manufacturer for more than 3 years. Post-tension concrete has a 25-year warranty, and it's put together with these cables and rebar, and when they pour the cement, they actually tighten the cables and the rebar, and they put it together. So it's all one gigantic piece. And you're not going to get the cracking, you're not going to get the movement. And so we do have both of those quotes. I've shared those with the superintendent. And that's where we are.
Will, could you explain the science behind the crude? Just Google it.
Thank you. So you have no idea whether there'll be any resolution before this spring when the tennis team gets out there again?
No, nothing will be done to those courts for this spring.
So not even just filling the cracks?
So we did that a year ago. So I've been here for quite some time, and we've resurfaced it with paint and the cracks 3 different times. We've replaced the post, the net post once. This last summer, the court was repainted and resurfaced, and the cracks were filled. And before winter came, there were cracks. Because we're just painting over a problem at this point. We actually had them. If you walk on the court, you'll see some high areas and some low areas, and it almost looks like there's a rock coming up through. And so they actually ground those down to try to make it flat. But of course, whenever you grind something down, now you're making another low area. So in my opinion, we're beyond a facelift. Another paint job, another just resurfacing, because that's just covering up what needs to be fixed. So those courts are probably 30 years old, because I've been here for 24 years. So they're at least 30 years old, and they're well beyond their life cycle.
Well, hopefully we can get the concrete replacement material soon.
And I met with one of our tennis coaches the other day, and we talked about how to go about getting some courts. And I said, well, I think why don't you go pick the brain of the Tri-Town Track and Turf, find out how they organized it, and then if there's some fundraising done and someone wants to Craig Sickles Memorial Tennis Courts, and they give $200,000, we'll name them Craig Sickles Tennis Courts.
You'll have to put in $1 million and 1.2 to get your name on it.
But I think some fundraising, either with the capital budget, either with another referendum. I think there's a myriad of ways that might be able to happen.
I guess I have no concept of what this is going to cost. You're thinking a bond is necessary for this? So to replace it with post-tension concrete and new fencing, because you have to tear out the fencing. You can't do it with the fencing there. Yeah.
Don't quote me, but I'm trying to remember. 240,000 to do 3 courts with post-tension concrete. To do it with asphalt, I think it was 130-ish.
Wow, okay. How many kids play tennis?
Excuse me?
How many kids play tennis?
The boys' team had 12, 14 this last year.
Yeah.
12 or 14. The girls had more this last. The girls kept more. I think they kept 16 or 18.
But it's not just the number of kids who play, it's the quality of the play. These guys made it to states finals last year, so they deserve a good courts.
Well, I think it's it's kind of like the track and turf. That track at 9 o'clock in the morning, you look out the back window and there are strollers walking around the track. So the tennis courts aren't just for the school. It's a community place. I mean, that's where the community plays tennis.
Okay, any other questions for Craig?
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Michelle. Just want you to know, Michelle, they all got 15 minutes. You get 3.
I know, because I'm usually very quick. I'd like to keep it that way if we can.
Ginny knows you're efficient.
Yes. So you have the purple sheets. I can say that in comparison to last year, we are within like 0.5% of where we were last year at this point. So we're right on target. There have been no surprises to date. And no upcoming things that that have been like bubbling out there. So I see us trending right on track with what we did last year, just so that you know at this point. In reference to this, and kind of where Jim was leading, we've been talking about going to the new software. We are now on track. We have a calendar that we're putting together right at this very moment, trying to get all the dates set up and when the timeline is and how that's going to play out for, we're trying to go for a July 1 start date. They're talking maybe August 1, maybe even September, but we're pushing it. We're getting back to them as quickly as possible at every single turn. So we've already started the whole payroll process. I'm working on the general ledger process. There's lots of questions to be answered. There's lots of movement to happen. I will say that in reference to Jeremy's ransomware, we are being hosted in Texas at the moment, and the crossover that's going to happen is that we're going to then be hosted in Falmouth. It's still all Tyler Tech, but it's, one is being hosted much further away, but we are being hosted. So we do kind of have that kind of secondary security. So I just wanted to assure you of that. So we will be able to pay our employees, no problem. I don't want to see that happen. Yes. And I don't really have anything further to offer here at the moment. Any questions?
Questions for Michelle? No.
I think
You're under your 3 minutes. I like it. 2 minutes. Okay, board comments and committee reports. So we have on our agenda finance, strategic communications, policy, and I think there's another one. No, that's it. But if anybody had anything else they wanted to mention or any other subcommittees that have met that they would like to report out on, now would be the time to do that.
I would like to request that sometime in the coming months, I know that's going to be tough because we're getting into budget season, that we discuss weather and school closings and possible strategies for minimizing our impact, whether that's looking at Kate's not here to appreciate this, but looking at our vacation schedule or watching closely what the Camden School District is doing about remote days for weather cancellations. I think given our crazy November and the climate reports that are out, I think it would be wise of us to proactively discuss possible strategies for the future.
Okay, noted.
I can tell you that yesterday, or when did we have the late start?
Yesterday. Yeah.
The bus driver who dropped off our kid opened the door and said, don't you think we should extend 2 hours if we start 2 hours late? So there you have it. You would probably have to renegotiate some contracts, but just an idea. I thought it was a good one.
Just keep them another 2 hours. Yeah, I don't know how that would fly. Okay, so anyone see an issue with having a conversation about that? I think it's probably a timely one. I mean, we're certainly hearing about it. I think just from a informational standpoint for folks that watch these meetings, just what our process is, and when we're making the call, it's not a flip a coin kind of thing. I mean, we have people out on the roads in all 3 towns and that sort of thing. So I think that's probably a good idea. Any other requests, suggestions? Yep, Valley?
Yeah, I wanted to respond, or not respond, but to follow up to Josh, who did that presentation or whatever public comment on composting. I am very interested in knowing which of our schools do compost. How much do we stand to save in not paying the hauling fee for the entire solid waste, and separate the organic waste and send it to composting?
Yeah, because I think it is happening. It's certainly happening in some of the schools. I remember, I'm not sure if anybody else went, but there was a high school group that put together a presentation, I think it was last year, maybe it was the year before, I don't know, time flies, about putting the program in place in the high school, and they had gone out and got some grant money, and they brought in some of these outside companies to help them put together the plan, and I could be dreaming it, but I feel like my daughter tells me they do some here. Is that? No?
Not really.
No? Okay.
We recycle at lunchtime.
Yeah.
But not food. So container plates.
Gotcha. Okay. So, I mean, I think there's some opportunity there. And
what I understand right now, it's a patchwork. So some schools have grants, some schools have funding from a committee, some schools don't do it. It'd be really nice if it works for one school, just have it district-wide and include it in the budget.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it would cost any money. I mean, according to what he said, it would be either breaking even or even just saving a little money. And it's the right thing to do.
right. I mean, if you can get break even, it's kind of a no-brainer if it's not a huge increase to, I'm guessing it's, increased time and effort on the staff's part. But, train them and, yeah. So. Okay. Any other from that front? Okay, so finance. Kate had to scoot, so she asked if I would do her finance report. So you all have the finance subcommittee report. We met before our last board meeting on November 14th, and the majority, if not the whole meeting, was essentially around a conversation around solar power. Peter Joseph, the town manager for Freeport, they started a process, I'm not sure how long ago, probably in the last year or two, about potentially putting some solar panels in place within the town to help cover their electricity use, and the water sewer district was doing the same. And so they had gone out and actually gotten some engineering work and feasibility studies done on solar, and were kind enough to include the school system in when they were doing the feasibility around what kind of power do we use in the schools, do we have buildings we could put them on, et cetera. So it's very preliminary at this point. There's not a concrete contract date or anything like that they're looking to hit. They're really just trying to be ready if the political climate makes it more attractive financially to move to solar. They want to be ready to take advantage of that. So they wanted to get us up to speed as it relates to what our part could be if we were interested in it. And I think the board, the finance committee in general felt that it was worth the conversation and continuing those conversations around other, power sources. And I think the next recommendation was to actually have him come and do a workshop for the full board, just for us to see what's possible out there. There's a lot of different ways it could be done. We could put it on the buildings at the different schools. We could do one big sort of field that has the solar panels for all three, the town, the sewer, and the school district. There's a lot of options, and the costs and benefits are different for each. So that was the recommendation, was that he would come to a workshop for the school board. So be on the lookout for that. That'll be coming in the future. We also talked about a couple of policies and how they relate to the finance committee, and so Michelle and Kate, we're going to bring those to the policy committee with some recommendations for that, and we set some additional dates for discussions around the cost sharing. So we had our first one this evening. And all of those dates are on the website. And that's the finance. Strategic communications.
Okay, don't have a whole lot to report here. We began looking at the exit surveys, and we will finish looking at those at our next meeting and bring the information to you. You can see that we had 50 of them, and 27 were leaving for educational reasons, 23 for non-educational reasons. And I can say the one thing that came across loud and clear is that people were very, very positive about staff, all the teachers and staff. They couldn't say enough good things about all the teachers and staff. And you have in your purple folders a communication list that Becky put together of the communication that's going on in our issue 5 now. The first grouping of dots is district-wide communication. The middle grouping is from the communication from schools, and the last grouping is board communication. And I can see even from listening to tonight, there may be some things that need to be added to this, like Instagram and Facebook at Durham Community School, and that you're working on School Messenger and the system. What's on the back of that is what was put together for communication in 2014, and you can see this is a much more comprehensive list, but that's just really for your information. We had asked Becky to put together a list of kind of what was going on in the school system right now in terms of communication. So that's really all there is to report.
So Candy, we're going to get to have a longer look at the exit survey results.
Yes, the next meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
So just so I understand, an educational reason for leaving could be what? I'm just trying to, because I was surprised to see more than half were leaving for educational reasons. So what would be an example of an educational reason?
Well, religion was one, or they, they were going to Catholic schools, that kind of thing.
So that's considered an educational reason? If you're leaving for religion?
That you weren't moving away, kind of thing.
So the 23 that were not religious, that were not educational, were
those
basically
were
moving.
mainly, those folks were moving. But educational reasons, they also, some families felt that their kids were having a very difficult time and they were looking for another place for their kids to go to school, or they were moving to another school because they wanted to go to one of the charter schools. They were looking for some very specific kind of subject matter, that kind of thing. Those were some of the kinds of things reasons that they were leaving that were were educational reasons.
But you have further, it's not like educational, non-educational, you have further details to dive into.
We'll be reporting on that, yeah.
Any other questions for strategic communications? All right. Policy.
Basically, we had a long list of policies we looked over. Several, as you can see, we reviewed and there were no changes. The policy about student fundraising activities, we had quite a bit of discussion and felt like we needed more information. So Cynthia was taking it to the B team, and we'll bring it back to our next meeting. And we didn't quite get to the advertising in the schools one, so that'll be at our next meeting also. But there's quite a list of policies scheduled already for the next meeting.
Okay. So we don't have any policies we're reviewing tonight?
Nope.
Perfect. I mean, not that it's perfect, but. All right. So are these things different things? Policy committee on here, and then policies reviewed by the policy committee? Are those the same report? Okay, so they're the same ones that were in the other report. Okay. Unfinished business, none. New business, consideration and approval on the committee appointments. So, as you may recall, last meeting was our first meeting for Mara with Sarah's departure from the board. So Sarah was on the safety committee, so that spot is open. Don't all raise your hands at once for that spot. I joke, but I do think that's a really interesting and important committee if you can make the times work for you, which is quite early in the morning. So I don't know if we have anyone who is interested in that spot. Oh, you're interested in taking that. Great. All right. So I would take a motion to put Maura on the committee with Jeremy, second Maddie, and second from Valley. All those in favor? None opposed? And Kate wasn't here to advocate herself off the Region 10 board, so on she stays. And then personnel, this was the adjustment to the agenda. So in your packets, you have a peach? No, what's it called? Salmon. 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 You'd think I'd remember that. Beats into my head. Okay.
I'd like to recommend Anna Brown for the occupational therapist position. Anna has a bachelor's and master's degree in occupational therapy from the University of New England and has been working for Spurwink for the last 5 years as an occupational therapist. One of her references said, Anna's passion for her field shows, and when she is asked to share her knowledge or give suggestions, Anna extends this openly. We look forward to having Anna join our team.
So I would take a motion. John, second from Jen. All those in favor? Oh, it's okay.
So is this a 0.8 or 1.0?
It's a 1 point FTE, and the extra 0.2 is because this particular candidate has the ability to do billing, which the other person did not. So
it was a 0.8, but it's getting up to a 1.
1 point, and it's budget neutral.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor? None opposed. Thank you. Public comment? Will? Then I would take a motion to adjourn. Lindsay, second from Maddie. All those in favor? Okay, thank you.